Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 is perhaps one of the worst Call of Duty games that has ever been made. So let's start with the campaign here, where essentially this campaign was split into two sections, essentially two halves, I would say. Half of it is pretty standard Call of Duty stuff, mostly, mainly shootouts, a little bit of stealth, and that's almost the entirety of that. I guess I throw an AC-130 mission in there too, but it's mostly pretty standard stealth with only a couple of interesting set pieces like doing stuff in the tundra, trying to find people in the snowstorm with thermal, or there's a bit of we're in like these train tunnels. There's some trains going by. There's not nothing there, but there's not much for set pieces and interesting fights going on. Most of the things you see here don't really impact your overall strategy and just duck and cover, shooting enemies kind of affairs. The other half of the game are these open world levels that are kind of like clearly inspired by Warzone, where they drop you in and then there's like, all right, go. There's like a fog of war around. They have to uncover the map. There are some objectives for you to do that are basically the same objective multiple times usually. You start with stealth because nobody knows you're there yet. But once you go loud, people will be alerted, and while you can kind of regain stealth, you don't really, they're still more alert now, so they're kind of like out and around the prowl. There are also a bunch of supply crates around. You can get usually there's 20 guns or something in these maps. You're running around looking for that, and you get field upgrades, kill streaks, and other equipment and ammo and stuff. And it's a pretty neat idea at first, but you start to see the cracks. Like, for example, you can only carry 2 guns. You can only carry 1 field upgrade. You can only carry 1 kill streak. So if you want to swap, you have to run back to one of these locations to change it out to something else for a different situation. And you don't really know what the situation is going to be until you're already in the thick of it. So it's hard to know what's going to be helpful to have and when and where, unless you've already done the mission, at which point you're already done, so it doesn't really matter anymore. It also just means there's not really much incentive to find all the things, because they're not really you don't get anything for it. They're just there to give you cool access to cool stuff to potentially make it easier or at least different each time. The other issue you'll notice with these missions is that there's too many of them, particularly when you have them there's 2 of them that are back to back, and it's I just did this, and it doesn't feel fun and unique anymore. Black Ops 6 had an open world mission. There was one of them. It really stood out. It was a well-crafted open world mission. They gave it time to actually work on the different things that were out there in the encounters and stuff. And in here, it feels like they just kind of took these maps, plopped some AI in there, plopped some crates in there, and here are your objectives, go. They don't feel real well thought out. Still kind of fun, but not for half of the campaign when you expect there to be a bit more variety in the campaign. It feels like a really strange choice. And this could kind of be forgiven if there was a cool story propping it up. Unfortunately, there's not. The story isn't crazy terrible or anything, but it's mostly a serviceable plot that is there to kind of just get you to your next encounters. And when your main levels and missions or whatever are not that good, or that exciting to get to, then the story should be picking up the slack to help there, and it's not. So it kind of brings the whole campaign down into this area where it's it's just not very... I understand why people don't like it. It's not very good in terms of a Call of Duty campaign. It's a very, very strange take. It's different, but strange. The multiplayer, on the other hand, is pretty much par for the course. It's the standard kind of stuff you're used to, and if you've played Call of Duty multiplayer in any number of years, pretty much you get the idea. You get a lot of familiar modes and things you can do. There's some new stuff in here. I don't there's an escort thing with a payload. There's diffuser destroy, which is search and destroy, but it starts with the bomb already planted, I guess. I don't know, there's like a few different like modes. Like a get higher mode, which is like a parkour race to the top of this level. There's some interesting things tossed in there, but then there are some special modes that you can only play in certain playlists, and you can't even do them like when you're building custom games and using bots and all that stuff. You can't even select them there as a mode. They're only in these custom playlists, so you have to go to the custom playlist and just hope that you get that game out of that playlist while you're in there, because there's no guarantee of what game you're going to get, which is not great. I think they're on a rotation and stuff, or periodically and whatever, or maybe an end of life update will add these as selectable things in the private matches or something. But yeah, ultimately, like, I don't know, you could do kill streaks or score streaks. You have gear you put on instead of perks, which is not really that different. It's just that you can, I guess, kind of see it on you, sort of. I don't know. But ultimately, yes, the multiplayer on here is like any other Call of Duty multiplayer. You know what you're going to get into. You can get it in pretty much any other Call of Duty game as well. Now, what's kind of interesting is that for the first time, Modern Warfare now has zombies. They've decided to hide this mode for some reason. When you go in, there's the multiplayer / zombies mode when you're doing the launcher. You go to the launcher, launch Modern Warfare 3, whatever, and you select the multiplayer / zombies. But it always starts you on the multiplayer screen. So you have to hit back on that screen to find, the selection thing for multiplayer, ranked play, private match, and of course, zombies. So then you go into zombies, and basically zombies is like, it's kind of like, in Cold War, how they had like those big open world things, you're kind of running around looting stuff or whatever, and there's zombies around. Or do you remember in Modern Warfare 2 when there's the DMZ mode? It's like that with zombies. You just are plopped down with your squad of people on this big map. You have some missions you can go for. You have contracts you can go for to get extra stuff, to getting money and whatever. You can loot for ammo and weapons and equipment and everything as you're going around there. The closer you get to the center of the map, the tougher the enemies become, but the greater the rewards are. The more you play, also you're getting money and stuff too. It's not just, being brought out for other stuff later and buying things in there. You can buy weapons and gear and all this other stuff, but you can also use the money, use it for like the pack-a-punch, the Perca-Colas, that kind of zombie stuff in there as well. So there's not only some regular dudes for you to kill, but also zombies out there and bosses, like zombie boss things and everything. So that's out there. There's some semblance of a story happening if you can find the stuff to unlock the bits and pieces of the story, but it will take you a ridiculously long amount of time to grind up enough to be able to do the things to see the actual next interesting piece of the game. It's meant to be very grindy and played for freaking ever. Yeah, it's one of those where essentially I feel like it's just like, oh, and also then you want to be able to get out alive. You have like an hour or something before the copter like just leaves. And it's other players are also out on the map as well, but it's all cooperative, which I kind of like that idea that everyone's kind of out here and like you can help like revive each other and you can kill enemies and stuff, but you can't kill each other, so it is just a PvE thing still. That's kind of interesting, but not interesting enough for how boring and repetitive most of the thing is. And I feel like this is, once again, a thing that is not going to please zombies fans, because this is the only mode and the only map. No round-based zombies, no interesting fun maps, no getting overwhelmed in close quarters by a bunch of zombies, until you just can't take it anymore. No completing missions for a whole story thing and then getting out after completing every unique thing there is to do. It's just kind of running around doing a bunch of repetitive random stuff. It feels like it doesn't mean anything. It's just a big-ass grind fest with zombies plopped into the DMZ mode. And I think that this is like the ultimate issue with Modern Warfare 3, if I'm going to bring this out here, okay? Is that we're looking at all these things, is that Modern Warfare 3 does not capitalize on the previous games. It tries to do things differently. And in its attempt to be different, it ends up failing miserably, right? Like, it didn't bring up like the impactful emotional moments of the first Modern Warfare. Those aren't here. The cool, interesting levels of like a very level designs and fun set pieces and stuff that were in Modern Warfare 2, those aren't here. So what you end up with is just this campaign that's just very nothing, that feels like a weird experiment that just didn't really quite work, that clearly borrowed heavily off of Warzone to try and make itself relevant. We have a zombies mode that isn't going to satisfy typical zombies players. Maybe if you like Warzone or maybe if you like DMZ, you'll like this mode. But maybe if you like the Outbreak thing in Cold War, you'll like this mode. But as the only zombies mode, most zombies fans are going to look at this and say, what the hell is this? Where's my actual zombies mode? This sucks. And they're not going to like it. In fact, even I liked the version in Cold War, and I don't like this. I think there's issues here, for sure. And, again, doing something different that people just don't really want. And then the one place where doing something different would have actually benefited them was the multiplayer, and they didn't. And that, I think, hurt them as well, because you can play any other Call of Duty to get basically this kind of experience in it. So why would you go to this one for that? That's where you needed something different to actually elevate it. But of course, they couldn't lean on Warzone for this the regular multiplayer, because then it would just be like actual Warzone, which they don't want to step on their own foot there. So they're just going to keep this be a regular multiplayer thing for people who want that, at least, because there's still an audience for that as well. And yes, it just fails to capitalize on its predecessors, and it instead tries to do something different. The things it does differently don't work, and largely this is probably because they had no time to really work on this game. It was meant to be an expansion, a DLC expansion to Modern Warfare 2, when they decided, you know what, we're going to bump this up and make it a full game. And then they had to crunch their way into making something that was worth your time. And kudos to them for giving you a decent length campaign if you actually do everything in those big missions. If you uncover the whole map and everything, even though there's not much incentive to do so. There is a lot of time that you can spend in this game if you're really into the stuff here. But why would you? It's not worth the price tag, and it's also just not necessarily all that worth your time. There's so many better Call of Duty games to play. This is one of the absolute worst Call of Duty games out there, and I know that sounds bad, but I do want to keep that in perspective, because Call of Duty oftentimes is just kind of like buckling under the weight of its own success. There are so many Call of Duty games that are so good that when you get ones that aren't that good, they look really bad. And if we were looking at this as, it wasn't a Call of Duty game, and it didn't have that IP attached to it, and it was just some game that was doing the stuff it was doing in the single player and the online and the zombies thing and whatever, that kind of stuff, I think people would look at this and be like, wow, this is pretty fun. This is actually pretty cool, and you would find a fan base for it. But since it's within the context of Call of Duty, it's getting judged a lot more harshly, which is unfortunate, but it is the reality of it. And like I say, there's not much here. So basically what I'm saying, ultimately as well, is my hope for the future is to see a Modern Warfare 4 with enough time to actually, work on it properly, where they're able to do something emotionally impactful with the story, with lots of cool, varied, and interesting levels and set pieces and missions for the campaign. Having a solid multiplayer is, I'm sure, is going to be the case. It's almost always the case, right? And, for the third mode, whatever it is, or even if there isn't one, as long as it's good, or the other stuff makes up for not having one, I don't really care, right? I don't think it's necessarily that hard to make it a solid experience. I just think that the lack of time and the weird choices in this one really ruined it, and I hope that the next one, if it exists, will right the wrongs that were here. Learn from the mistakes. And maybe have one of these open world levels, but only one of them, or two, or not half of the game. I think that's it for me. What do you guys think of Modern Warfare 3? What do you think of these different, I've been down 3 of these now. Do you guys like the more direct review thing instead of me, sectioning everything out so much? Or what do you think of the style? That would be interesting to know, too. I've heard some split opinions on, some people really like the zombies mode like this. A lot of people really hate it. Although the campaign is almost universally panned, it feels like. So, I don't know. I'd be interested to hear anybody's thoughts on these things, especially if they have a different opinion than the normal opinion on these. I was, weirdly, really harsh on 2019, and I was weirdly favorable to Modern Warfare 2 from 2022. So, I guess I'm falling in line now, where it's like it's kind of hard to look like a contrarian when the game just is this. So, that's my piece. And next we'll be going backwards to fill in some gaps. So I'll be hitting Call of Duty Ghosts next, which maybe getting a nice favor by being played right after this one. Probably will look pretty good, even though I've never played it before. It's not like a retrospective. I've never played it, so it should be fine. I don't know. You know I'm really soft on Call of Duty games. It'll probably be fine. I'll probably like it. I'm a wiener.
Пронесло! Мы ваши должники! Командир! Тут нет должников! Есть только преданность! Непоколебимая преданность!